Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the bill.
To the bill.
So prior to this debate beginning, I had no intentions of speaking on this bill whatsoever. There were two things that really came to mind that caused me to want to speak. One was, which was just referenced, the racial equity report card. And the other was a reference to Portland State University, which brought back a lot of pain and frustration that I had buried deep within myself over the last several years. To the report card first, it's frustrating to have people tell you over and over and over that your belief or you will be scored by someone else on whether you believe in racial equity. I mean, think about that. That is just, to me, that is outrageous. The fact that if you spend any time with me at all, you know that that's not the case. I mean, look at my family. The makeup of my children represent 3 different races. Look at my day job in my past, where I spent time in Fresno and Detroit as an intercity missionary, where I was the only white kid in the neighborhood. Look at my work internationally, where I go places where I'm the only white guy in town. And then tell me that apparently I should get a bad grade on racial equity. That's frustrating. But the part that I couldn't let pass, and the reason I decided I really wanted to speak, was not the report card. I mean, it's almost become not a joke, but it's almost become a side comment that I make to people that I've been called a racist in this building or something along those lines at least once a week since I've been here. And that's frustrating. But that's not what made me want to speak. What made me want to speak is when I thought about this cultural competency curriculum or outlines or standards or whatever you want to call it, and the idea of Portland State University helping to develop that. And all of a sudden, experience that my wife went through a few years back just came back to mind. And I've been sitting here literally shaking about this experience. The well-intentioned, I believe, of this bill, because we should pay attention to how we treat one another and how we treat people who look different or act different or who have different beliefs. We absolutely need to pay attention to those things. Those things are so important. But who decides which things are inappropriate and appropriate? Who decides where the standard is? What groups are and are not included? And so let me tell you about the social justice course at Portland State University in their graduate program. My wife received her MSW from this program, and I'm proud of that degree. But the most painful night of her graduate school was when she came home after being in that class. Weeks of showing up to the social justice class where the instructor would intentionally separate everybody into their little group, the groups that we're trying to say, hey, let's not draw a distinction, but separate into the groups, and the groups would then discuss how different they were from the other groups. So instead of focusing on the things we have in common, that class was focusing on the things that drive us apart. One of those issues was gender identity. And day after day after day, the teacher was teaching how if you believe that being a male or a female, if you believe that there are differences and that you identify as male or female, then you are a bigot. She was teaching this on a regular basis. And 3 weeks into the class, she makes a statement one day, and this class is about oppression, and it has some really good content. If you look at the curriculum, it's still being taught. The research on oppression, it's some messed up stuff. People have done bad, horrible things, and I get that. All right? But at this specific day, and I quote, this teacher looks at the class and says, the epitome of evil is a white Christian male. And my wife stands up or raises her hand and says, well, wait a minute, my husband's a pastor. Does that make him the epitome of evil? And she says, that makes him the leader of the epitome of evil. My wife filed a formal complaint. She got one meeting about it. And what was done to rectify the situation? Nothing. That teacher is still there teaching. That curriculum is still being taught. I'll wait till
Representative Barker yields his time. Please continue, Representative.
Thank you. Nothing was done. Nobody stood up. So then, after nobody responds to that, the teacher has the entire class, one by one, stand up and identify about their gender. Makes every single one of them, one at a time, go through and identify male, female, or non-binary. I'm trying to remember the exact term they used at the time. And the influence of that teacher on that class was so great that there were only 2 people who identified as female. Nobody identified as male. Who decides in these cultural competency curriculums, standards, groups, what views are and are not allowed? Why is it that some groups can have a religious belief and you can have the statement that as was referenced earlier about traditional marriage, but yet if they voice that, now all of a sudden are they out of line? Who decides? And we have references to microaggressions. I want to bring up a report that came out, highlight during the 2014-15 school year. For the instance, the deans and department chairs of the 10 University of California system schools were presented by administrators at faculty leader training sessions, which with examples of microaggressions. The list of offenses included America is the land of opportunity, and I believe the most qualified person should get the job. At what point do we say that America's the land of opportunity is a microaggression? And yet, in some places in the country, they've gone that far with this type of curriculum. This is well-intentioned, and we need to be paying attention to how we treat one another. But we don't do it at the risk of pushing some groups aside and saying, well, you can't believe that anymore because it doesn't fit into this small group who set the curriculum. And that is what happens at universities. If we trust the university to set the curriculum or the college or whatever group, you end up with a small group of people that decide what the rest have to live by. And if they don't, suddenly they're the ones branded. And so when we hear about that this bill is not punitive, well, guess what? Here I am, roughly 7 years after my wife went through that there's no negative consequences. Here I am 7 years later, and my wife still deals with that pain of being the one who was called out. And I still deal with that pain of being the one who was called the leader of the epitome of evil. We need to pay attention to what we're doing, and we need to not let our good intentions run wild without clear standards of who decides what is and is not included. Thank you, Madam Speaker.